Welcome back. A month ago, a little more than that perhaps, we had Evan Solomon on the show. He, of course, you know Evan Solomon, former broadcaster. He is now our Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation in Canada. Evan, thank you for coming back. I do appreciate the time. Last time you were here was about announcing the government kicking in a whole lot of money to start some industries here. I want you to hear, though, from a couple of weeks ago, I interviewed someone named J.F. Gauthier, who you may or may not know, CEO of a company called Startup Genome, talking about AI, and he had this to say.
In the last 10 years, Canada has lost 35% of its tech startup ecosystem market share. It lost about $200 billion in startup ecosystem value, about 200,000 high-paying jobs, because it did not invest as much as it used to. And everybody else, all the other governments, many of which we work with, are spending a lot more because they've realized this is a way to create jobs.
So now, to be fair, he's talking about then, not now, but he seemed to be not all that impressed with what was happening now. So what do you say in answer to that?
Well, first of all, great to be back. We've got about 155,000 people in Canada right now working in AI. And every company, the adoption rates, which have been low. In other words, companies, small, medium-sized companies in Canada, our adoption rates are like 8 to 10% below other G7 countries. So in the last 6 or 7 months, actually, that's gone up. That's all the good news. So we've got a robust industry, and our adoption rates, in other words, people using AI in companies for efficiency, that's going up. Now, I just want to tell folks, listen, that's a good thing because, like if you're a carpenter and your competitors are using an electric saw and you've got a handsaw, you better get yourself an electric saw, and this is what we're doing finally. We need tools to remain competitive, and secondly, we need them to serve Canadians better. We need better health care. We need faster service in the government. That's what we hope AI provides. I don't know whoever's making the comment about the loss of, and again, I haven't seen those numbers or where he's getting those numbers, but I will say there's a real, it's hard for me to comment directly because, as you know, Aaron, I just heard that. But look, we are really concerned about keeping Canadian companies here in Canada. And that's one reason, and we don't, for years and for generations, we've had a brain drain, right? We have brilliant Canadians, they start companies, and then they get bought by American companies,
right.
And we lose that. And so one of the ways that this new government is thinking is we're not just in there, look, we're going to make investments, the kind that you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago. But on the other side, the government needs to use its power to, use Canadian products. And a government contract is very valuable. That's why we recently announced something called a Memorandum of Understanding for Canada's only real large language model, or its biggest one. It's called Cohere. And just so folks understand, when you hear about ChatGPT or you hear about any of those very public AIs, they're from America, there's only 4 countries that really have they're called large language models. There's the U.S., they got a bunch of them, Gemini and ChatGPT. Then you've got the Chinese, and there's 2 other countries. One is France, and Canada's got a company called Cohere. The reason most folks haven't heard about it is they aim it at businesses, not at the public. And businesses that may not want to use those other countries' large language models. Cohere's incredible. The engineers are Canadian. They worked in the United States. They came home. When you talk about ChatGPT, the letter T, Transformer, they are the people that literally invented that. They started a company called Cohere. It's incredible. Now used by companies like the Royal Bank uses it. They just did a deal with BCE. And I will tell you that we just did a Memorandum of Understanding because they're strategically important to Canada. And the government wants to work with that company. That's a way of keeping our companies here in Canada and making sure we don't have the brain drain. We don't lose our IP. That's exactly why we're addressing that.
So it's interesting because that's sort of what was addressed in this column, which I'm sure you saw in the Globe and Mail a couple of weeks ago, the contention that, yes, you're right, we are losing some of this talent and that shouldn't be happening. And I know you're doing things to prevent that from happening. But the quote is, success is far more likely to come to larger, more concentrated ecosystems, and Canada is not currently set up to win on the global stage in that race.
So there's a long-standing issue for Canadians that, look, we're a middle power. The United States has 350 million people, and we've got 40 million people. So, of course, they've got larger pools of capital that they have access to. And so we have tried and are trying very much to make sure that investors in Canada, they come from all over the world. That's why you saw the Prime Minister of Germany and in Europe, because he's trying to get European investors to invest in Canadian technology and Canadian companies. Obviously, we get a lot of American investment here, which is great. We want international investment as long as the headquarters and the intellectual property stays here in Canada. And we've got to address that. And look, access anybody. Like, I spent the first part of my life, almost 10 years, running a business. And raising money is what businesses do. You have a product, you raise money, you sell, you keep raising. That's how you grow. Access to capital, whether it's from an angel investor or a venture capitalist or a bank, or then as you get bigger, institutional investors, that's a big issue for small businesses. Anyone who runs a business here knows that. Canadians need better access to capital. So we need more of these people willing to take a risk on small companies who have big ideas. That's what venture capital is all about. I should just say, Aaron, you have incredible venture capital companies in Montreal. You have incredible ones all over the country, Radical Ventures, and they invest in these companies. But you're not wrong. We need more, and they need incentives to do that because it's risky. And, like if you talk to someone in Silicon Valley, for every 10 they invest in, maybe one works. So it's risky. Mm-hmm. And sometimes capital here is a little cautious. We got to be a little bolder. You're 100% right.
One of the other things, Evan, that's come up, this idea, and we talked about this, I think, last time, and it still seems to be an issue, the amount of red tape that some of these companies have to go through as the laws are written now in Canada. And I know we talked about it. Is that beginning to change? Is that one of your focuses right now?
So, look, we have a Minister of Government Transformation to try to simplify the systems. Even, look, Aaron, you and I know each other for a long time. When I entered government, it's true, there's an alphabet soup of acronyms and agencies that it's hard to hack your way through. So, Joël Lightbound, the minister, is already on a consolidation and a mission to simplify. But I'll give you one example. Access to government investment. So, I'm the minister of something called Federal Development for Southern Ontario, where you are in Montreal. Melanie Joly has a development agency in Quebec. And that they help small, medium-sized businesses. And they give, and then again, I want folks to understand that these are zero interest loans that get repaid back at 98% level. So we're investing in Canadians so they can do something and then they pay the government back. Great investment. We'll always like to invest in the Canadians. So we're not just giving away money here. But you got to make sure that the application forms are much simpler and the money can get out the door really quickly. You still got to do your diligence. Canadians want to know that we're being careful with our investments. That's why you get 98% payback. It's successful. But you're not wrong. We got to hack through the red tape, simplify. And more than anything, because we're in a crisis. Like we gotta make sure that businesses get the help they need quickly because they can't afford to wait around for a bureaucracy.
Evan, I'm going to run out of time. The last thing I want to ask, and it's something else that came up, is the issue over taxation with respect to, these companies we're asking them to set up here, spend billions of dollars, and perhaps the tax system could be more favorable for them. Is that something you look at or are looking at?
So, Aaron, you're asking me a finance minister questions, and you got champagne there. I get it. You got to get a finance minister on that. Look, he's going to have a budget.
But you've heard the same thing from people you're talking to, I am sure.
But I'll give you some examples. Certainly in AI, the Prime Minister put in our platform things. I don't want to get too technical. Called flow-through shares. So these are mechanisms to help incentivize companies to invest in small businesses. We've talked about ideas, and again, the budget's coming out, like capital depreciation for investing in Canadian technology and Canadian businesses. So, there's a lot. You're not wrong. Remember, the first thing that this Prime Minister did was gave a tax break to 22 million Canadians, right? So again, you're pushing against an open door. Mark Carney came into power, and the first thing he did is he gave, families up to $800 back a year in a tax cut. So it's not like this, what you're saying is absolutely right. Now, the question is in terms of triggering investment, and I think you're going to see in the budget more incentives to keep money investing here in Canada. You're right on that again.
I will leave
I keep agreeing with you because you're right.
Yeah. It's nice to have that happen every now and then when you talk to someone in government. Evan, I always appreciate the time. I think you know that, and I hope we can chat again soon. Thanks so much.
I wish my wife agreed with me half as much as I agree with you today.
Yeah, that's never going to
All
happen.
right.